trying to hang on.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to T.O.'s Roadhouse. Glad to have you with us for this episode. In the house is Caroline Jones. Is
How
that right?
are you?
I'm wonderful. I have so many questions.
Aw.
So I just really want to get to know you. It's kind of fascinating. You're the first lady in the Zac Brown Band these days.
Yes.
So that's a huge thing. How is it living on a bus with a bunch of stinky guys?
Well, I'm really lucky. I'm spoiled. I'm on a separate bus.
Really?
I'm not by myself.
Yeah.
I'm with some other people, but I'm not on their bus. You know, I think when I first joined, that was one of the things that Zach and I discussed. And also Zach's on a separate bus. You know, they're not all on the same bus at this point. But they have a pretty set in stone dynamic. You know, I think it would be kind of uncomfortable for me and for them. I don't know if I could make them feel comfortable.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, they've been on the same bus. They were in vans before they were in a bus together, 15 years ago. So I was very aware that I was stepping into a, multi-decade long locker room, basically. And just trying to be really respectful of that. Not only because I respect them so much as musicians, but also just because I respect them so much as people. They're all family men. They all have families and kids and wives, and they're ahead of me in terms of the chapters of life, at least one chapter. And so I was uber respectful. I still am,
Well, and as you get older, it makes it easier as you travel so much out on the road, and the dynamics are much different than when we were young and
Yes.
crazy. Yeah.
I know, and I'm actually really grateful for that because I've never been like a real crazy out there party person. I've always been really career focused, very ambitious, very work driven. I don't know. I definitely could not have been in the Zac Brown Band 10 years ago. You can ask any of them. I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah. So give me your background. Where are you originally from?
I'm originally from the Northeast.
Okay.
I'm from Connecticut. Grew up actually really near New York City. I ended up going to high school and college in New York City. I went to Performing Arts High School and always loved music, was very driven from a young age, and moved down here. It's hard to say because I've been coming to Nashville since I was 17, so more than a decade, but really moved down full-time, I want to say like 6 or 7 years ago, because I lived in Zach's apartment for a while down here before I bought my house, and so, but been coming here forever, it seems like.
So was country part of your earlier repertoire did you get passionate? When did you discover country?
Not at all. I grew up listening to a lot of classic rock, a lot of classic R&B. That's what my dad loved, Motown and classic rock. And also some 60s singer-songwriter like Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Gordon Lightfoot, all that kind of stuff he loved. And my mom I grew up in the 90s, so my mom listened to a lot of Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston,
Gotcha.
Celine Dion, Barbra Streisand, the big vocalists. So I grew up listening to a lot of that. And then I was actually trained in opera. So I listened to opera and jazz for my singing training when I was a little girl. So I grew up listening to almost everything but country.
Wow.
And the extent of country that I knew was like Shania Twain, literally, like her crossover stuff. And when I was 17, I had one of my first managers say, you should really go down to Nashville and check out the country music scene. And I was like, what? And he was like, your music has some country undertones and some like singer-songwriter, that kind of country undertone. And he's like, and country's the only commercial genre left that has any moral compass and any kind of authenticity. And in a way, he was right, and any community, like a centeredness around community and authenticity and musicianship and storytelling. He was like, those are still the pillars of country. He's like, all the other commercial genres kind of don't have that. And I think he was very protective of me because I was a young girl with this big dream, And so I went down to Nashville. He set me up with some writers down here. They took me to the Bluebird Cafe, and I was done for. I mean,
Wow.
I fell in love. I feel like it was the missing piece of my artistry. I hadn't realized that there was a whole genre of music and a whole community of people, like a town that was centered around those values that he was talking about. And I had really gravitated towards them as a teenager through the singer-songwriters like Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan. But I hadn't realized that there was a whole town built around authenticity and musicianship and storytelling.
And country's broadened so much over the years. I mean, it's been influenced by so much stuff. I mean, even in the early days, it had R&B influences and bluegrass influences and
And
gospel
jazz and
and
Western
jazz,
swing and
all of that stuff. And as we progressed, and it's had its time with the pop influences and the hip hop and the rap influences. I mean, it's very broad as far as just the styles that are accepted, especially nowadays in country music. When you first got to town, for me, the first time I came here after bouncing around and playing in bands and things, I'd always felt a little like an outsider. The first time I rolled into town and I discovered all songwriters and the places where people hang out, it was the first time I felt like I was truly home and that I found all these other people like me. Did you feel that feeling when you started settling in the Nashville? Did you have that sense of awareness that it was something different for you?
Absolutely. And you feel it's so inspiring.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because every big fish in small pond in America and all over the world has moved to Nashville to chase this dream with this common love and passion and drive. And it's so freaking inspiring because you go to any bar, any club, any listening room, and you just hear so much talent. And especially for me as a musician, I wanted to set myself apart at a young age and be a proficient musician. To continue the story, my early days in Nashville, I got set up with Mac McAnally.
Okay.
And he helped me produce some of my first independent records. And so he brought me into the studio with Glenn Worf and Tom Bukovac and I'm trying to think at that time who was drumming, Greg Morrow and Steve Nathan and obviously Mac McAnally on guitar. And I remember learning the way that the Nashville sessions worked and I don't even know how to describe the proficiency for your listeners of these session players, like the caliber of musicianship that I saw when I was 20 years old.
It's unbelievable.
It's unmatched anywhere else on earth, that we know of. And I remember thinking to myself at that young age, I was like, these are the people. It would be awesome to have a radio hit or a career or whatever, but like, these are the people who I would want to respect me and to think that I was a real artist, a real songwriter, a real musician. And I just worshipped them at such a young age. The songwriters too. But I think there was something about the musicians. There's so much like humility in what they do. And just so much talent and creativity and the way that they can create on the fly and pull up sounds and change directions. And
it's amazing. You think about, playing in cover bands and going out and playing other people's music and stuff and copying record licks. You have to have definitely a certain skill set to be able to do that at a high level and be able to do parts and arrangements and all that stuff. But to be able to sit in the studio and, I was watching a thing on Bukovac the other day and it blew me away. And he was talking about how difficult it was as a young player to get into sessions. He said because you'll play a pass down and everything's good. You go back and you start working on your guitar solo, and you might think you played the best thing that you've ever played. You dug down deep and you just lit that solo up, and the producer's like, not really the direction I was looking for you. Can you try this? And you've got to be able to turn that switch off, not get your personal feelings attached to it, come back and give them what they want because it's not about you as a player. And the thing about
give maybe 10 options if
absolutely,
and they all have to be A+.
And then come back and play harmony parts with them exactly the same and do it in a quick time frame. And have the disposition and the humbleness because there's a vibe that's created in a session when players are together, and that's how I like to track. I want to have everybody in the room. I don't want to piecemeal things out. I think a record loses something when you do that.
I think you're right. I've done it both ways. My first record, as a musician, I wanted to learn how to play on my records because playing on records is a whole other skill level.
Yes. I can't do it. It's above my head.
Well, I'm getting there slowly but surely. But so on my first record, I really wanted to, the only way you can learn to do that is by, hopefully, I had a producer and an engineer who were patient and believed in me And the only way you can do that is by suffering through it and trying until you're good enough. You know, you have to learn. There's no other way. And you need time and you need someone's patience or your own, you know. And so my first record, I played all the instruments on my record except bass and drums. And it took us a long time to make, and I learned a ton and I became such a better musician. But my second record, I wanted to get other musicians in because I missed some of that tracking energy, you know, and I'm not necessarily good enough to be able to track down with those players, you know, especially when I'm trying to sing and co-produce at the same time. It's your energy is
a lot.
Yeah. It's too much. I mean, you just can't focus on it. You can't give everything the focus that it warrants. And so, but I still love playing on my records. But there is that magic that's happening in the room when people are creating parts that you want to be part of. So I've done it a few different ways now, but I will say that when you get players of that caliber in the same room, there is an energy and a magic that's created that's hard to reproduce through overdubbing.
Yes.
Overdubbing can have its own advantages creatively for you, like selfishly, because you have more parts to create, and that can be really fun and rewarding. But it is, I mean, there's nothing like being in a big session with those guys.
The arrangement process too. If everything is, for example, if you lay down an acoustic vocal with a click track and you just piece that out to everybody,
Right.
there's no room to make any alterations.
Right.
You know, if you want to add an extra beat or whatever, or something doesn't fit or create a dynamic, you've kind of lost the opportunity to do that
You're right.
in a lot of regards.
Right.
When you have that creative brain working, and everybody that you mentioned, from Steve Nathan to Glenn Wolfe all the way
Played
down,
on your records.
I've
Yeah,
had
yeah.
the privilege of being in the
Yeah.
room with those people, and I know the magic that they create, but the humbleness with the way they do it,
Yeah.
and they can share ideas. I mean, if you have a really good session of players and a really good producer that knows how to keep that energy level up, it's amazing. You can feel the magic when it happens. There's nothing like it.
And then as a singer, you're
Yes.
just on fire.
It makes the
You
hair
know?
stand up on my arm
I
thinking about it, because
know.
I've been in those rooms when it's happened.
know.
And you know, sometimes I've cut records that you don't really know, but when you know, you know.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
It really is. And to your point about arranging, I mean, that to me is the most fun is if you can bring creativity and freedom to those session guys, because a lot of times their hands are a little bit tied with commercial music and commercial arrangement. So if you can get a little experimental with them, I mean, they just eat it up, you know, it's like,
without a doubt.
you know, so I love kind of bringing to them and challenging them, and what could we do here, and maybe we modulate here, or maybe we do add an extra bar here and do a crazy drum fill or something. And it's so exciting to them because many times, and not to take anything away from modern commercial music, but many times they're playing below their skill level, really. Like they are capable of who knows what musically.
Well, you know, a lot of people don't realize, you know, my mama used to say, when it comes to, say, bands like Alabama in the 80s,
Yeah.
And she would say, oh, that family harmony, there's just nothing like it. And I want to tell her now, Mama, that wasn't them singing harmony on that record. And that wasn't Jeff Coogan playing lead guitar on that record.
Right, right.
And a lot of times producers will come in and they'll put a ceiling on what you can do, because that person that the public perceives as being the person that played on that record, they got to be able to play everything that's on that record.
Right.
And sometimes their skill set is a little bit below where that's actually
Yeah.
at. So that happens a lot. As a musician, can you tell the difference when you listen to people's records?
Gosh, I don't know. It would depend on the band and how big of a fan I was, if
Yeah.
I could tell if it was the session players or if it was the band.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what you're asking,
Yes,
right?
it is. Yes.
I'm not sure. I know that, for example, when you listen to a Zac Brown Band record, the reason that they have a sound is because there's hardly any overdubs and they're usually tracking live, and they've known each other for so long that their personal and musical dynamic comes to life on record, on tape.
Yeah, but think about this. So, like a lot of rock and roll records, what's the guitar player from Toto? What's his name? Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue.
Google.
Okay, curly-headed guy. Anyway,
I know who you're talking about.
So a lot of rock and roll guys will come in. He's going to look it up, and it's right on the. God, it's going to wear me out because he actually played on a lot of Michael Jackson stuff. Steve, Luke.
Amazing.
But so you would have bands, rock and roll bands, that would come in, and they would hire guys like him
Yeah.
to come in and show the lead guitar player what to play. They
Yeah.
might not actually play on the record,
Yeah.
but they're helping him map it out. So they're trying to push his skill level up. So it's still the band playing, but those are different perspectives about how different genres of music work,
Yeah,
which
and
I
that
find
can
very
be
fascinating
me
too.
too. And that could be very helpful. Like Tom Bukovac played on this last record of mine, and he played some things. First of all, he comes up with things that I would never in a million years come up with, let alone that he's so far beyond my capabilities. But it's really fun because then what he plays on my record, I have to learn how to play that live because I'm my own lead guitar player.
Yeah.
And I share lead guitar with my guitar player, Riley Bria. But it's such a wonderful challenge because now I'm learning Tom Bukovac's licks and Tom Bukovac's parts.
And it's helping you grow. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
I've heard stories that Glenn Campbell in the early days actually did a lot of that stuff too, that people would actually play on the record and Glenn would come in and cop the licks. So he actually
Yeah.
played the part again. I don't know that to be 100%
Yeah.
true, but I've heard a lot of stories about like
that's
that around
interesting.
town.
God, he was an incredible
Was he
guitar
not?
player.
Oh, without a doubt.
Such an amazing feel. Yeah. I could talk about this stuff all day. I
Me
love
too,
it.
because
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by all of it.
And the session players are really the unsung heroes to me of this
Yeah.
music. And their talent is, I don't think people realize.
So what's 5, 6 instruments?
Yes.
What are they?
Yeah, so I play guitar, banjo, piano, dobro, and harmonica. And I'm not a prodigy on any of them. I'm so grateful that people associate me as a musician and with instruments because I worked really hard to kind of have that skill set under my belt and to be seen as a musician, taken seriously as a musician. But I honestly just love it. I've been fascinated with production since I was a teenager. I used to listen to records and the chorus hits, and I just think, it's like eating food and you're like, what is in this? Like, how do they, it's one thing to enjoy the taste, but it's another thing to think like step by step and ingredient by ingredient. Like I wanted to understand how
that.
records sound like that and hit like that. And I think that's part of why I was so interested in the session players and why they choose the sounds and parts the way that they do and their understanding of a mix and the landscape of a mix. But that's really why I picked up different instruments, just because I wanted to learn how to bring the ideas that I had to life. It'd be easy for me to sing a part to a musician, but I wanted to be able to play it as well. I wanted to be able to bring it to life.
So as with instrumentation, when you got in the studio, did the early engineers and early people that you're working with help you kind of find some of those different sounds? Let's see, when I met Derek, he was working at Sound Emporium, and he worked on a couple of my records as an engineer. And so being able to find certain sounds that fit certain songs, even different acoustic tones, whether you're going to stack acoustics or play acoustic solos, the tones are always different. How do you approach finding those sounds, and how do you use them? If it's something more traditional or something more jazzy, do you change direction with what you're doing?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the fun of it, right? It's like a playground. It's never ending. And you can really go down so many rabbit holes with production. And I've been down many, some successful, some unsuccessful. But I've just been lucky to be surrounded by folks, producers, engineers, and musicians a lot more experienced than I am. And who also at the same time is being way more experienced and proficient than I was and I am, also believed in me and also gave me a chance to, didn't just say, oh, no, this is what we're doing. Who cares? You don't have to understand it. They really let me in on the process. And I think because they saw that I was really curious and passionate, like genuinely. And so, and Zac told me that too. Zac uses a different producer for every album because he says, I want to learn everyone's tricks. Like, I want to learn how everyone does things differently. He's like, there's something to learn from every producer, the way that they track. Everyone is so different and everyone's taste is so different. But I first started working with Mac McAnally, who taught me a ton and opened up my eyes to this world of session playing and musicianship and camaraderie in the Nashville community that I hadn't known existed. Then I produced my first record with Rick Wake, who's more of a pop producer. And he's produced Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston and Jennifer Lopez. And he's produced Trisha Yearwood. He's done some country, but a lot of pop.
Yeah.
and was one of the main guys at Sony in the 90s and 2000s for pop. And his team, Gustavo Celis, the engineer who did my first 2 records, I mean, they taught me, I really credit their patience and their belief in me with like sitting with me for hours with a click while I tried to get a part, while I tried to understand what tone this guitar should have. Should we turn on this pedal? Should we try this? You know, it's just trial and error, and you need someone to bounce an idea off of. Someone to help teach you and guide you. And I just feel so grateful for their mentorship and their patience, because it's, you know, you're learning and you're trying your best, but it just takes experience.
It does. And there's, you know, I've seen it. I don't know if we've kind of missed out on some of the special eras, because now everything's in the box. I mean, it's all there. I mean, every sample you can imagine. But I've heard stories of people going outside during breaks of sessions with their drumsticks and tapping on hubcaps all around the parking lot looking for a certain sound.
We did a lot of fun stuff like that with my first record.
See, I think that stuff's
so
cool.
Much fun.
When you're searching for something that's just available to you, that's not already created in a box somewhere.
Well, and also, no, you're absolutely right. And also even, you know, the fact that you can time align and tune anything now is like a real crutch. And it's one thing if you just want to put something down and make a catchy record, but it's another thing if you're going to have to play that live. Like, I always wanted to be a great live player. All the artist players that I look up to, like Vince Gill and Keith Urban and Willie Nelson, like their guitar voice live is as characteristic as their voice, you know? And so with that in mind, like I didn't want to time align everything and just tune everything and say, okay, it's good enough. You know, I really wanted to learn how to play it properly because I wanted to be able to deliver it live. And so to your point, that takes a lot more time and creativity, and a lot more frustrating too.
And I think that just because we have the tools to make perfect records don't mean we should.
Yeah.
Because I'm a YouTube junkie. I'm going down rabbit holes all the time. And there's some guy, and I can't remember what it was, but he'll take a classic rock record, you know, like a Zeppelin, and go in and hard tune it. Sounds like crap.
Yeah.
You take that vocal and tune that thing and shove it up in the mix. You've lost all the magic of the era.
I gotta listen to. I gotta watch.
And he does that with several other classic rock things, and it's fascinating because they actually mixed through the flaws before, and it seems like everything was wider and it breathed more.
Right, and we're talking about some of the greatest vocalists.
Absolutely,
they're still human,
but they weren't perfect.
Right, they're humans.
But you know, there was. In the early days, I remember before automation first came up, there was the little junky demo studio I spent a lot of time in. And when we would mix out our demos, we didn't have automation. There would be 4 of us on a console with everybody holding their parts.
Yeah.
And for people that are outside the business, it's almost like you're playing the last instrument to finish the record.
Yes.
And nowadays,
that's why mixing is such a craft.
And nowadays, everything is automated. So once you get it set, it'll go back to that same spot. Right. But before, when you were mixing it down, if anybody missed their part,
you had to start over. Yeah.
And there's something really cool about going back and listening to that and knowing what they were doing. And thinking about the Beatles doing all of that early stuff on a 4-track and pinging things down.
Well, and thinking about some of those singers, and you realize that there was no tuning. Like, you listen to a Queen record and you're like, that is his voice, you know, and that might be 1 or 2 passes. I mean, they could still edit, but nothing like we can do now. So it just blows you away, the talent that some of these folks have.
I think if you listen, and I was talking about this with another guest recently, the way a lot of vocals sound, and I notice it in the guys especially, and I think we're getting some personality back now, but we went through a few years there where I had a hard time telling who was who, because everything is tuned so, and it's hard as a vocalist to hit some of those notes if that's not the natural way you sing.
Right.
When you get done with your vocal and you leave personality on it and all of a sudden it's tuned to this place, that's not the way you sing. You can't reproduce that vocal live.
I know. I've used, when I was younger, tuning was pretty standard. I mean, it still is very standard, but it took me a while to notice the sound of it and not like it. Like, I actively don't use tuners now because I feel like, and I know this is controversial because everyone uses tuners and a lot of people use tuning live now, but I don't know. I can't get my head around it.
Well, if you like Dylan, I mean, he wasn't tuned.
No, he wasn't tuned. I mean, even you listen
And
to
if he
Aretha
was,
Franklin records, like the in between those, the blues notes are what make her voice have character. But not only that, I think it's more basic. And again, I don't want to like judge anyone. I know everyone uses it to a certain extent, but I just feel like if you're a professional singer, you should be able to sing in tune. Like if you can't, why are you a professional singer?
Amen.
Like, and I that might not be, again, I'm not knocking anyone. For me, I take a lot of pride in being able to sing on pitch. Like I worked really hard for a lot of years and trained my voice to sing on pitch. And with my instruments, like I've worked hard a lot of years to be able to play in time, play in tune. And am I perfect? No, like not by any stretch of the imagination. Like I have so far to go, but I like knowing where I am. And then I can take pride when I nail it. And when I don't, I can be like, I have so far to go. But at least I don't know, there's a certain pride that I feel like, I feel like needs to be more pervasive now. Because
when you make mistakes, how mad at yourself do you get?
Really mad.
Do you really? Do you hang on to it for a while?
I used to be worse. Yeah. I used to be really bad. Like it would ruin me for a few days.
Really?
Yeah, especially if it was something important in a show. Because the thing is, and probably your listeners can relate to this in some area of their life, but my guitar player always says, he's like, when you step on stage, you're half the player that you are when you're off stage. And I think that is so, people forget, because I used to think if I practice enough and I nail it enough by myself, when I go out on stage, I should be able to nail it. But going out on stage, the adrenaline and the experience of that, that's a whole other training ground. And you have to learn how to relax and operate under pressure.
And not push the beat or drag the beat.
And so I think I get less angry at myself now because I realize that it's literally part of the experience. Whether you make a mistake by yourself or in front of other people.
Oh, if you make it by yourself, you're getting laughed at.
Yeah, exactly.
Does everybody turn around and look at you? Yeah, I know we do.
Well, we try to give them about 4 bars and then look at them.
You ever started a song off? It's just you starting it off. But have you ever started off a half step off? Like with your capo? He turned around to me. It wasn't you, it was Joe's like, wrong key, dumbass.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, no.
But see,
man, you're right.
being
What's
around
this?
the Zac Brown Band has given me more of that attitude. It's allowed me to be more raw and less timid. I think for so long I was so scared of making a mistake. I was such a perfectionist. And they are just so raw, balls to the wall. They grew up in clubs. So they, there's a certain energy and also a certain fearlessness and confidence that you earn after years and years and years of performing. And I'm just still catching up to that. But I'm better now. I'm definitely better now because I really truly see it as growth. I used to see it as a failure, and now I see it as this is part of getting better. Like taking a risk, even if you fail, is part of, you can't get better without doing that.
Absolutely. And being in a band that doesn't demonize you if you make a mistake, that just kind of laughs it off and goes on, and because everybody does it.
Yes.
It's just the way it is. It's part of the live experience. Yeah. And I love going to shows. I want to see that. That's part of the whole live experience.
Everyone does. Yeah. It makes you human to the crowd,
And those magical nights when great stuff happens, I mean, that's just, you want to be there, witness that stuff too.
I saw Godsmack last night, and Sully started the song off a half step off. He was like, wait a minute, they just informed me I'm in the wrong damn tuning. So then the whole crowd laughed it off, and it was great. I love moments like that because it shows you that they really are human. Nobody's perfect, and I love that.
Did you, were you familiar with the number system before you came to town?
No.
What a shock was that?
I wouldn't say it was a shock. It actually makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Like it's a very logical way, especially for the purposes that it's being used in this town, where you don't have to write things out note by note. Like classical notation wouldn't make any sense for what sessions are going on, So actually, I think the number system is pretty brilliant. I can't remember. I remember hearing David Dorn talk about who invented it, but I can't remember now who did.
What was the guy that?
Um,
You know what it does is it allows you to have structure that everybody can read, but still give you the freedom to express yourself as a musician.
exactly. And to change
Yeah,
keys
because you
and
you can
tempos.
still be creative inside that box.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm not fast reading it, but I can read it. I mean, I understand it. I'm not as fast as some guys, depending on how complex the song is. If it's normal, average level of complexity, it's pretty easy to.
So does the band play on all of Zach's records?
Yeah,
Have you played on a record yet?
I have.
Tell me what that was like.
Oh my God, it was so exciting, kind of nerve-wracking, because like I said, they track live. So they're, you don't really go in for overdubs. They're all tracking live and coming up with parts. And I mean, you're stepping into, I always say, it's so surreal being in the Zac Brown Band. It's not like they're holding auditions, it's like joining Metallica or the Grateful Dead. Like it's an institution in a way. And if you had told me 10 years ago that I would be a part of it, I would never, ever have even, it's not a dream that I thought to have dreamed. So then in moments like that, like playing the CMA Awards with them or going into the studio with them or those moments where you just can't believe that you're a part and you get to contribute, I want to bring my A game as much as I can and just contribute anything that I can, support. It's really fun too because it's a totally different discipline than being an artist. Being a sideman it's like a different side of your brain because it's more like being a session player. It's an act of service, like
Support.
yes, exactly. Like I'm in service. I think of myself as in service of Zach's music and Zach's songs and the band as a whole. Like I just want to, if I can add a part, whatever it entails that makes it feel that much better, or my presence on stage or my voice, my harmony or whatever it is, a high harmony. I always say the only thing I have on any of them is an octave.
There's a T-shirt in there.
Yeah,
somewhere.
right. So anything I can add and contribute, like I'm just constantly racking. In the beginning, I was really just holding on for dear life because I kind of got thrown in the deep end. And now that I'm a couple years in, I'm really trying to think and be more intentional about like, what can I add? Like, what can I contribute? What do they need? Zach is such a characteristic acoustic player that actually most of what I do is play rhythm guitar, and just add that. It's basically like a shaker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It acts as a percussion instrument, but it can be really helpful because normally they have one person on electric, one person on keys, Coy and Clay switch off. And so there is room for that acoustic guitar. Because Zach's playing lead on nylon or on acoustic, and he's a very underrated guitar player. People don't realize.
He's primarily all gut string, isn't he? I mean, is that how?
Yeah, but his finger picking and oh my God, when he plays the guitar in a room, it is so. Kate, how loud is it? It's so loud. Like his hands are like, first of all, like that big, and I don't know, his articulation and the melodies that he comes up with. He's really influenced by James Taylor. So it's like those guitar melodies while he's picking and while he's strumming. And it's, I've never seen anyone play guitar like him. He's very, very characteristic. Yeah.
Everybody in the band is awesome.
Yeah, they are. Everybody's and it's cool because everybody has such a unique gift and talent to offer. That's why I like really want to find mine, and contribute it because, everyone, even like I said, Coy and Clay, who switch off on lead guitar and keys, they have such different sounds on electric guitar. And even on keys, the way they play organ, they're fantastic organ players. And it's cool to see how they all create something greater than the sum of its parts. I mean, that's what a band should be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. What do you have a producer that comes out and helps arrange things, or does Zach pretty much handle everything on the road as far as sounds and structure and all that stuff? Do you step outside of record arrangements or anything? He
does, but that's something we all do internally as a band. Matt Mangano, the bass player, and kind of acts as an MD in terms of organization and charts and arrangements, but everyone contributes. If we're going to change up, Zach actually loves changing up arrangements because he gets really bored with playing the same songs the same way over and over year after year. So he's always trying to find a way to throw in a cover, throw in a middle eight where we can do something crazy, rock our faces off or do so, he comes up with these really fun, crazy musical ideas. And he's musically fearless and very diverse. Like he's not afraid to go super hard rock or super bluegrass, or anything that's going to make the show exciting and compelling. And he knows that his fans appreciate kind of the gamut of styles of music.
Yeah.
So it actually makes for a really diverse, really interesting, fun show. And every year he loves playing covers. I don't know if you've ever seen him play covers, but like he loves arranging covers. So, almost a third of our show is covers.
I love covers.
Sick 'em on a Chicken is a great example
So
of.
good.
Oh,
Yeah.
you would never expect to hear that
Yeah.
bizarre twist in the middle of it, and
I
then they
know.
just tie it all back together.
They do. They
brings it all
yeah.
back around. It's like,
Yeah.
what the hell was that? It was
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Look how excited he gets.
I
It
love-
is. It's really fun. It's so much fun. And it's so much fun it's such a challenge to learn when I first joined the band and I had to learn 50 or 60 Zac Brown Band songs because they changed their set list every night too. So I had a database of songs that we would definitely play. And that was like maybe 20 or 25 songs. And then the rest of them, they just pull out of a hat, basically. And I was just like praying for the night that, the song that I knew would be chosen as opposed to a song that I didn't know.
Did you ever get caught off guard with one that you knew that y'all had run, but you hadn't run it in 2 months?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They don't really... Yeah, for sure. All the time. That still happens to me because sometimes they'll call audibles on stage and they're old songs that I've never really played with them. One time they called Jolene, and I thought they were talking about Dolly Parton Jolene, but it was a cover of a Ray LaMontagne song, and I just muted my guitar and just went like this for the whole song because I was like, I've never heard this song in my life, Yeah. And we were in front of like 25,000 people, and I'm just going.
So what do you listen to for enjoyment now? What genre do you dive into? What do you listen to at the gym? What do you listen to for entertainment?
I listen to a bunch of different stuff. I actually really enjoy modern pop music.
Yeah.
Because I love production, and a lot of the modern pop music fascinates my brain, like my production brain. I love Kyleigh, who's a dance producer. I think he's like a modern, almost like Mozart type. Like I think he's an amazing composer and arranger, and I love the sounds he chooses are so interesting to me. I love this band called The War on Drugs, which I think you would like actually too. You should check them out.
Are they like Disturbed or anything like that? Because I love Disturbed.
I don't know. They're kind
I
of
like hard rock stuff.
They're kind of like Zac Brown Band loves all those guys love hard rock. I never got that into hard rock.
I'm a huge Lady Gaga fan.
Yeah, she's great.
I think she's a brilliant artist. But we were talking about all the metal stuff, Five Finger Death Punch.
Yeah.
But most of that stuff that I like from that genre, I typically work out to because
Yeah.
I like to go into beast mode.
Yeah,
that's a whole different thing. But it's different types of music. If they do for you what they do for me, it's like if I'm driving and you. Different things affect the way I drive. Music affects my brain.
Me too.
It either calms me or puts an edge on me or makes me want to go fast or makes me want to go slow.
Yeah, I actually have to be not careful, but I'm cautious or conscious of where I listen to music because it's hard for me to focus on anything else. Like it's even hard for me to listen to music when I work out because I end up just I don't know. I get so into the music. It's hard for my brain to turn off.
Yeah.
But to go back to the War on Drugs, I think you would like them. They're kind of like modern day Springsteen or U2.
Cool. Okay.
There's this great singer-songwriter named Lizzie McAlpine who I love. I loved Nicole, her record last year. Huh? Yeah, Nicole Gallien's record last year. She's a songwriter here in town. That was my favorite record of the year. That was so good. It kind of runs the gamut.
I got you.
Yeah.
So we usually don't get nervous most of the time. Like we just did a show with Willie, and that kind of made me a little.
Where was it?
It was
That's
Bonner
out of Kansas
Springs,
City.
Kansas.
Bonner Springs.
Yeah. And so I looked over the side of the stage, and Gary Allen's looking at me, grinning, holding the beer, whatever. And then knowing that Willie Nelson's coming out after that, I was like, man, it was a little nerve-wracking there for a second, but got it under control. Do you ever get nervous? And if so, when was the last time you got nervous?
Definitely. I get nervous a lot less than I used to in the beginning of my career. I remember the first time I went out on the Zac, because I started out opening for them. So that was the first big amphitheater arena tour that I'd ever done, where I was consistently in front of, 10,000 people every night or more. And I remember that summer, every night I felt like someone stuck my body in a light socket for the 20 minutes that I was on stage. And I was just like, like the whole time. I mean, I remember the first day of that tour, the first show that I walked off stage and I had felt relaxed and I just burst into tears because I was like, oh my God, it's happening. Like, I'm finally getting used to this.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, like, pre-show stuff. Do you like to be by yourself? Do you want to talk to somebody? Do you have a pre-show kind of 5-minute or 10-minute thing?
Yeah. I have a lot of many rituals and practices. I definitely am a loner. I like to be alone. I don't like people to talk to me before the show. Maybe one day I will, but I feel like even as I relax, even if I'm super relaxed, I don't want to get too relaxed. I want to be aware of what I'm about to do and that people paid money to come to this show and I want to be on my A game. So, I can talk to people after the show.
Later.
But to answer your question, the last time I was nervous was last week. We did live TV for the EP release, and I always get nervous on live TV.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you?
I do. TV
Yeah.
still makes me a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you something a while ago, too. It's when I was growing up, I couldn't study. If music was on anywhere, I had to have complete silence because I couldn't focus on anything else.
Yes.
Does music distract you that way? You made a comment a while ago
Yeah, it
about
does.
something like that. And I couldn't do anything with music on. I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, it just affected my brain.
Yes, I definitely have that. Like, I don't know how people just have music on in the background all the
Can't do that.
time.
Mm-mm.
I can't do that. Like, even with my husband in the car, we'll be in the car, and if music's playing, like, if we're having a conversation, I want to turn it down.
Because don't ask
Or
me,
just listen.
and sure don't ask me about another song if something else is, because I can't, because I'm listening to the bass line and the arrangement
Yeah.
subconsciously at the very least.
I know. It's funny. It's funny how your brain does that. It's not something I do consciously, but I do find it hard to focus on music and something else at the same time.
Oh, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Were you a good student?
I was a good student, mostly just because I've always been a diligent person. But I didn't really enjoy school. I'm not a big school person.
I don't blame you. I didn't enjoy it.
I didn't enjoy school. I always felt like I knew what I wanted to do and it was a waste of my time,
What do you mean?
I just always knew what I wanted to do, and I always wanted to be in music, and I always felt like I had my life path ahead of me, and I was like, I'm wasting my time here. Which is, it's such an arrogant thing to say as a young person, but it's also kind of true in a way, because if you were lucky enough to know what you want to do, like I was lucky that I had a family that nurtured that. But I think, you got to know, I mean, you would know, you're a parent, you got to know your kids, because like my sisters loved school and they loved the community and they loved sports and extracurriculars, and they were, really popular and all. I'd always had a one-track mind in terms of what I wanted to do with my life.
When you first moved down here, who was the first celebrity that you met?
Well, the first celebrity that I thought I met was Mac McAnally. He's maybe not considered a celebrity to other people. The first celebrity that I met was Billy Currington. I was driving down the, I don't know if you can put this in, but I was walking on the road and Billy Currington drove by me and hit on me. He did.
All I can do
Have
is
I never
just
told you that story? I was only like, I don't know how old I was, maybe 19, 20. I don't.
Billy.
Yeah.
Billy. Billy.
I think he was hitting on me. If he wasn't, then this is embarrassing, but.
That's really funny. It's been amazing to watch Nashville grow. So you've been here how many years?
I don't really know.
9,
Let's say
7.
Yeah, let's say 6 or 7. probably full time.
And it's changed a little bit since you've been here.
Yes.
I'm telling you, I wish you could have seen it in the 90s. Music Row had such a great charm. And for somebody that is as passionate about the recording process and the musicianship, there was a certain charm that it seems like we're losing a little bit of, because
that was
everybody.
the golden age of the record industry,
It
too.
was, because now there's condos and hotels and stuff. Now everybody ran around the alleys, and you knew every little publishing house, and you knew where everybody was hanging out after hours, and there was just this little small town community mentality in the middle of this big old city, and it was ours, and it was very special, and everybody was successful, and it just had a great vibe to it back then. You would have really loved Nashville back then.
I would have.
And I always felt like, even when I got to town, that I was an old soul, that I kind of missed my place in life, because I always loved the older stuff more. And I always wanted to gravitate back to all that old, and still find a lot of passion in all the old music. How far back in that old catalog, I mean, as far as traditional country music, do you go back and experience some of that and try to educate yourself on some of the really old cats like Ray Price even?
Absolutely. I mean, that was the first thing I did when I fell in love with country music. When I was 17, when I got back from Nashville to New York, and I was going to college in New York, I started at the Carter Family and Jimmy Rogers and went forward.
Cool.
And it's such a fun time in your life, like that 18, 19, 20 years old. That's such a fun time to discover something because you're so passionate about it. And you feel like you're not an adult, but you feel like you're an adult. So you're like, this is my music. Like, I'm studying this, And I fell in love with a lot of the older traditional country music. That's what I really loved. Like, Willie Nelson is one of my all-time favorites. And I know he's not the old, but even Eddie Arnold and that stuff, like, I loved that. And I loved Bob Wills. I love Western swing. Like, that is so fun to listen to. And talk about great musicians.
Oh my gosh.
It's incredible. And the fact that the Texas Playboys is still going, like, in different iterations, is so interesting and cool to me. It's like the Preservation Hall Jazz Band. Like, it's an institution,
It's kind of like Sleep at the Wheel. I mean, they're an institution.
Yeah.
And I love all that old stuff. Texas swing.
Yeah, what's your favorite traditional country?
Merle Haggard had a huge effect on me, but I really gravitated more toward the baritone singers. Keith Whitley was big for me, and a little bit of Hank Jr. But when George Strait came out in the early '80s, I mean, it changed my world, because he had a lot of that Texas influence in his music. But he was, for his time and place, he was a little bit more slick and polished sounding than what a lot of people really thought he was. And I didn't realize till later that the area that I grew up in what we call the Arklatex area, which is Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma, where it comes together, that whole era, Strait wasn't a platinum selling record for years. He was kind of known as a regional artist, but he had a huge impact on me. But mine go back as far as Glenn Campbell and Charlie Pride, and all the way back into my single.
Talk about polish with Charlie Pride.
Charlie.
I
loved him. He was such a sweet man. I got to know him and his family over the years. He was always very gracious.
That's so
broke
cool.
my heart when he passed away.
Yeah. What a class. I mean, you can only imagine how much elegance and class, because how much elegance and class we saw that he had.
Tons.
But the ground that he broke, like the barriers that he broke, imagine really the true elegance and class that he must have had in order to.
Oh, and had to fight through some things.
Yeah.
And I've heard some stories that, Ferlin Husky was not very nice in that regard. But at some point, he fell in love with Charlie Pride and really ingratiated. And that was his blessing on Charlie Pride was one of the things that opened the whole country format up to him. But Charlie handled everything with so much class and dignity. And you look at where we're at now. I mean, it's not only it's broadened up for everybody across the board. And he was such a groundbreaker.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
That is so cool that you got to know him a little bit.
He did my fan club parties in the early 90s. He was just so cool.
Wow.
And I remember just hearing those old songs. I told people when I was little, obviously there was no social media and everything. There's pictures of me in cowboy boots with a plastic guitar and a cowboy hat on. And my mother would tell everybody that I said I sang like Charlie Pride and I looked like Glenn Campbell.
I love it. So do you think that George Strait, when even early on, like you said, in the early 80s, when he was still a regional artist, Did he still have that knack for choosing great songs?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, some of that early stuff, I still love some of the early records more than anything. But he always did his own thing. I mean, he loved hardcore country music. He didn't really kind of start getting, I'd say, pop until what's the country? The Pure Country. When Pure Country, that whole soundtrack changed everything. It was like a 2-hour George Strait video.
Right.
It changed his career. It put him into the stratosphere. That's
Wow.
really the thing that catapulted him at that
Wow.
particular time. But I mean, but it's been different for everybody. I mean, you never know what's going to be that marquee thing that changes your life. You know, I remember hearing stories about, Willie Nelson, the whole outlaw movement. It was a conversation. They said, y'all got to get to Texas. There's something happening here in Austin. And it broke open, and it changed the lives of, guys like Hank Williams Jr. and Willie Nelson. I mean, it changed the whole landscape. But it's been different for everybody along the way. You never know what that little spark's going to be that makes it happen. It could be that little magic thing that happens that changes your freaking life and puts you in that next level.
And then you're an overnight success.
After you've got years and years and years of playing your fingers till they bleed, and all of those late nights and sleepless nights when you can't turn the music in your head off, that people that don't have
they don't
they don't understand it. I mean, but I think it's cool.
You also mentioned that you knew George Jones and he was kind of a mentor to you. Just for me, selfishly, can you tell me like how you met him and what he was like?
George was the first big tour that I was on. So I went out with him in '92. And George...
So that was with your first record.
My first single released in August of 1991. The album dropped later. I think Sticks and Stones.
Sticks and Stones,
It went number one in January of '92, and then I wound up out touring with Jones. So there was a rotation. Chestnut was on some of them. John Anderson was on a lot of them, and we would go out there and do Rockin' Chair with Jones at the end of the night. And he was kind of like a sweet old granddad to us at that point. I mean, he still had fire. George could go out there and light that crowd up. I mean, it was amazing.
How old was he at that point?
Let's see, George died when he was 82, 83, and that was about 2014. Oh, man, he had to be in his mid-60s.
Yeah.
I mean, 60s, early 70s.
That's awesome.
So, but he embraced all of us, more so than I think any of the other legacy artists really did. He was... But George had a big time, even in his later stages of life.
Really?
One of the things that broke my heart, I loved him so much. I got to do a charity record with him. So I went in the studio with George, and George was probably 80 at the time. It was just not long before he passed away, and he couldn't hear and he couldn't read the lyric, and I was having to show him how to sing the parts, and he was upset, and he hugged my neck, and he was thanking me, and I'm like, he was like, I remember when I used to be able to do this easy, son. He said, I just really appreciate you helping me. I mean, he was just so gracious, and it broke my heart because I knew at that point that
it was close.
It was close, because he just couldn't do it anymore, and it was really sad to see.
I know.
But it was a special moment for me. I'm gonna cry. I got to be there.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
And you got to give something back to him after all he'd given to you. Yeah. Even that little gesture that meant so much to him.
Absolutely. And hopefully everybody gets to find a little piece of music like that where you get to. And you always say you don't want to meet your heroes because they'll disappoint you. That's not always the case.
Yeah. No, I find that like the real heroes like are the most humble. Like I've gotten to work with Vince Gill a couple times, and he's just the most like his ratio of talent to humility. Same with Mac McAnally. Like they're both at the top.
I think as you get older too, and as you've had success and you're able to look back down the road. You realize how special it is and how few people actually get to live in that space.
Yeah.
And it's easier to take all that stuff for granted when you're young and cocky.
Yeah.
But the more life you live, the more you realize that it's just a small percentage of people that get to do what we do at this level.
And it's not all merit based. It's not all talent based. Like there's some magic to it. There's some, like you said, lightning that strikes that changes your life. And so it does, I can imagine that it does bring a lot of gratitude and humility. And also, like, I have a couple young artists now that I really try to go out of my way to support. And I still consider myself a brand new artist. But I love lifting up other artists. I always have, just because I'm such a fan of talent. Zac is like that too, and Jimmy Buffett, who's another one of my mentors. And I remember someone saying, "Oh, thank you so much," thanking me, and I'll repay you and whatever. And I was like, I'm passing the baton. Like, so many people have given me so many opportunities, and like I can't wait to get to a place in my career where I can give, like, you reach a
That's
hand
the cool
out.
part about it, isn't
It's
it?
so cool,
Yeah.
like, to be able to reach a hand out and even give a tiny opportunity at the place I am in my career, which hopefully I get a lot farther, but to be able to help someone else up even just a little bit, because I know what it meant to me, and then to have the mentorship of people who I worship and admire and adore and have listened to forever. Like, it's just such a validating, it's just such a gift, and it really does make you want to be better and take advantage and then help other people too.
Without a doubt. People ask me this question a lot, and it's a really hard thing to answer because as you're touring, you see the back of a venue. You really don't. I mean, it's you kind of get trapped in your own bubble.
Yeah.
What's the coolest place you played? I mean, a lot of times
Coolest venue?
yeah.
Probably Fenway Park. We've gotten to play there a few times.
Is there a history there for you from coming from up north?
Not really, because the Red Sox were our enemies, from where I grew up.
Yeah.
But my husband's from Rhode Island, and so Red Sox and Fenway is iconic to him. But it's just such an iconic venue, and we've also played Wrigley Field in Chicago a few times, which is pretty iconic. Hollywood Bowl. I mean, those are pretty iconic, all three of those that we've gotten to play. But there are certain cities that I love. Like, I love Charleston, South Carolina. I love Seattle. I love nature. So anytime we go to a beautiful city or a city on the water or something, I get really excited. But in terms of venues, those iconic ballparks are probably up there, just because of the history,
What's next on the list of to-dos? What's the next thing for you? What do you want? What haven't you done that you want?
Gosh, so many things, Tracy. Well, in terms of venue, while we're talking about venues, it is a dream of mine to play Red Rocks. One day I would love to play at Red Rocks.
Amazing.
I've heard it's incredible, and it's so beautiful. I've never even been to a show there, so I really, really want to. That's on my bucket list. In terms of like goals I have for my career, my main goal is to just get better at my crafts all the time. Be a better singer, better songwriter, better musician, better band member, all of those things. That's really, to me, what you can control in this industry. Like, everything else, all the other goals, to have a number one or to have a Grammy or to have this, those are great goals to have, but there's no real like there's no way to control all that and attain it. I like focusing on being the best artist and most well-rounded musician I can be, because I feel like in the long run, to your point, like in decades to come, like what I'm going to really want to look back on is that I gave my all to my craft and to the audiences that I had and built that. Like, I've learned from Jimmy and Zac to really super serve the fans that you have and just build out in shows and on the road, because ultimately, like, that's the career that you're going to have in 30 or 40 years. Like, once you're past your commercial peak, once you're past the awards, once you're past this, like, can you go play shows and connect with people? And so that's what I'm really trying to build ultimately. And, I look up to you and people like you who have that and do that. Like, that's what I want to be doing when I'm in my 50s and 60s and 70s and hopefully beyond. Yeah. I mean, look at Willie Nelson, but like, what's better than that? That, like, you have a job in music your whole life. Like, what could be better?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. There's nothing else that beats it.
Yeah.
How does social media fit into all this for you?
Social media is a great tool. It took me a while to come to peace with it and to understand how I could put my music and my authentic self across on it. Because, like all other kinds of media, what's the most popular on social media is unfortunately kind of like the lowest common denominator of humanity. And so you kind of have to, you really have to reconcile that of like, am I willing, who am I? What brand am I trying to put across? Brand is a word that's used a lot now. how do I connect with people? But am I willing to sell my soul for this many followers or this many likes or this many? I mean, to me, I'm not, because I know the kind of career that I'm trying to build and the kind of credibility and brand that I'm trying to build. And I know there's an audience for that. And maybe it's not the biggest audience in the world, maybe it's not millions and tens of millions of people, but that's totally fine with me. I'd much rather have a music career and be respected as a musician than be an influencer. Like, that's just, I'm not in the business of that. And I think every artist now really has to ask themselves that and like really know who they are. And some artists are able to kind of skate the line and do both, which is great. They have that kind of personality, or they have kind of a shtick that works for them that just happens to be really popular on platforms like TikTok or Instagram or what have you. And more power to them, because I think if you have a brand like that, you should lean into it. But I think you really have to know who you are and what you're about. And it's not going to work if you're trying to be something you're not. There's so many people who are so good at being so outlandish on social media. Like, you're never going to compete with them.
I've had several young TikTokers on, and we're trying to understand and make comparisons and contrasts between what these young kids are doing when they're building a TikTok following, and they might have 4, 7, 10 million followers.
Yeah.
And doing and having to post things on a regular basis,
Yes.
but they're producing and they're writing and they're doing all these things, and they're their own camera person and all that. And then they get this visibility up, and then the record labels start courting them, and then they make that transition. Some of them make it well, some of them don't, and some of them have decided that's not where they want to go.
Yes.
So it's a complete different mindset.
It is.
But being somebody that's chasing the path that you're chasing, I don't really see where a lot of that fits into your psyche about that, because it would be a waste of time in a lot of regards. That doesn't mean that you look down on any of it. I'm just saying, your time is better spent perfecting your craft.
It is. And I think that is something that time will tell, because, a lot of, especially people who are on your team who support you, that's hard for them to hear, because they see these people getting this, quick dangling carrot, and they see people having this many followers. And it can be distracting. Like, it can be tempting, but I think that's why it's really important to know who you are, what you're about, and what you're trying to accomplish. And then, to me, it becomes really fun, because you can design content that's around your music that's really creative and hopefully compelling, at least to your audience and to people who will potentially be your fans. And I love doing that. Like, I love creating visual content. I love editing. I love music videos. I love capturing live performances. I love sharing my lyrics. I love conversations like this. Like, these are all things that you can share on social media that there's an audience for. It just might not be, the most commercial, most mainstream, most viral, most splashy audience. But gosh, like I said, I'd rather have a music career. But that's just me. I think everybody needs to reconcile that for themselves in this day and age. And I think it's really hard, because people grow up seeing this glorification of this certain type of fame and this certain image. And it's really misleading for a lot of young people about like what actually makes you happy in life and what we should be modeling ourselves after. And I also just think the amount of content and visual content, especially, that you're expected to put out as an artist is exhausting and really distracting. And it's tempting, because you want to grind, you want to work hard, you want to get everything out there that you can to get as many ears on your music as possible. But there is a law of diminishing returns with creativity, as you would know.
Yeah.
And so, gosh, it's a balance. It's a weird time.
You seem like you have a very good head on your shoulders.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your passion. I mean, I can tell by the way you talk about everything, and it's very sincere. And I'm glad to know that there's still some of us out there.
Thank you. That means a lot to me.
It's been an absolute pleasure sitting and visiting with you today.
Tracy. Likewise, it's been an honor for me to be here and speak to you. And gosh, I've been listening to your music since I've been listening to country music
Well,
when I
thank
was
you.
a late teenager.
I
So.
hope we get a chance to share the stage together at some point. I've never really had a chance to do a lot of shows with Zac over the years, but I look forward to our paths crossing again. Much, much continued success.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Caroline Jones.
I want to listen to you play is what I want to do.
Well, maybe I'll, can I tune your guitar to an open
You
tuning?
can tune that thing
I
however
can
you
play
like.
you something that I was working on the other day, but I also want you to teach me something.
Okay.
So what should we do first?
I don't know. Do you want to do the open on this? Or,
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
I can do that. Yeah, let me tune on mine so I don't ruin your action. I was gonna ask you, what pickups do you use for live?
So this is a Matrix Infinity.
Do you like it?
Love it. Because I
Really?
So this is Jason Isbell's signature Mama Beat.
Oh, wow.
So it was made to be played on stage. So notice how the dots are bigger? For low stage light?
Yeah.
So this was made to be purchased, taken off the shelf, walk on the stage, plug it in, go. So Jason and Mark really figured out.
So, and those are the pickups that he uses?
Yes. I've not changed a thing about it.
Wow,
I've
that's
seen him actually play one of these live. So I was like, holy shit, that sounds amazing. I've got to have one. All right, what you want to learn?
What do you want to teach me?
I don't know anything.
Come on.
What's a Tracy Lawrence song you want to know?
Give me a hard one.
A hard one?
Yeah. I gotta do some, I might not be able to learn it now, but give me some homework. I mean, come on, we know that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. That's all there is to it. Shit, you gonna put me out of game.
You don't start acting right.
Yeah, I know. She's a lot prettier than I am, too.
I love that.
All right, now teach me a Zac Brown.
Okay. Let me try to think of which one I should teach him.
Something within my wheelhouse, something I can do there.
This is one of my favorite songs of his. It's called Day That I Died. Well, this is my key, but because we covered in my show, but it goes. So it's kind of like he does all these cool. But he plays it so, I think he doesn't play it in this key. But I just love that.